How widespread is this behaviour? And if it's as widespread as people are saying, why do so many boys and men, as we just heard, behave this way? To try to answer that, we've gone to psychologist and educator Steve Biddulph, the author of Raising Boys, Raising Girls, Stories of Manhood and the New Manhood. He has a new book called 10 Things Girls Need Most, which is coming out next month. And Steve Biddulph says it's time for rape culture and the blind eye many of us are turning to it to stop.
Rape culture is the jokes, the conversation, and the attitudes that many boys and men have that minimises rape. It says, oh well, it's a bit of a joke and it doesn't do any harm, and all the kind of myths that are around that. Whereas in fact, rape is a horrible thing, and it has very long-term consequences for anyone who has ever experienced it, and so there's multiple factors that contribute to rape taking place, and that alcohol is a big one, and a lack of empathy of the perpetrators, just simply not having empathy for what that must feel like to another human being to be treated in that way. But a strong factor is the mindset that it's no big deal. And that was, I think, what came out in the young men who were writing about this from Wellington College, was the kind of, it's just normal, it's fine, and coming back to the interview that you had with the Wellington College principal, I felt very much that he was backing away from doing what was necessary, that what we men have to do, and what the adult culture has to do in schools and in families, is to be very clear that our values have to show in our actions, that we don't tolerate this. And seemed to me to be backing away from doing anything but making excuses. And part of rape culture is making excuses, saying it was just immaturity or it was just bravado. But very often when rape takes place, it's that immaturity and bravado that's in action. We know the studies into this are that young women in university, residential colleges, or young women attending university, where most of these young men will go in New Zealand, they have about a 1 in 4 chance of having a really serious sexual assault experience, and about a 1 in 100 chance of actually being raped. And those are horrific statistics, and they're only the reported. And what I know as a psychologist is every day I would talk to people when I was a counsellor who had experienced things like this and had never reported it, but it had lifelong consequences. And so people have to make a stand. And the things that people say in private, those are their true attitudes, John. Does that make sense? That's what they really think. And it's what people say in private that forms the permission culture that says this is really fine. And so the only way to address this is not to just pontificate at a school assembly, but for mums and dads to sit their sons down and say, this is the wrongest thing you can basically do, and I never ever want you to do anything like this to a girl or another boy or anyone else. That's what we've got to aim for, and we've got to be very explicit and very firmly spoken. And when boys don't have those attitudes, we have to remove them and tell them, we don't want you in our school.
We're talking a lot about schools, and in this case one specific school, but all of these kids have homes, and many of us have sons. And so what is the responsibility of the parent to have conversations with their sons, even if this is difficult to talk about, and even if we would like with all our hearts to think our boys will never behave like this? What we're beginning to understand is that lots of our boys are. So how do we have these conversations with our sons?
Yes, I think you just have to be brave. And sometimes when these things happen in the news, it provides a pretext to turn off the TV, or later that night to sit down with your son, or when you're doing the dishes together, to just to say to him, look, I want to talk to you about rape and the fact that you're going to be in situations. It's always a practical thing, John. You're going to be in a situation. There'll be some of your friends who are talking in this way, or they're starting to treat a girl in a disrespectful or pushy way. Have you thought about what you would do? Because young people, under pressure, they have trouble thinking straight. And if they've had a few drinks, it's harder still. So you need to be prepared. And it's really important for a mum to say, son, I want you to always treat women well. Even if they are not behaving well, I want you to treat them in a caring way. And to look him in the eye and say that when he's 13 or 14 years old, he's already seeing this stuff on the internet, he's hearing this talk at school. You have to tell him straight. And then dads have to come in and say, a man doesn't behave that way. I want you to never, ever behave that way, and be very, very explicit and clear. I think we've muddied around it too much, and I think Dr. Moses was muddying around it too much, the immaturity, or it was in private, or the boys were so remorseful, worrying more about reputation than about that some girl is going to be hurt if we don't speak up. So this is one of the most important things. I'm not usually this angry about much, as you know. I'm a very amiable guy, but when it comes to these questions, we've got to talk straight and make sure people act straight.
That's Steve Biddulph, the author of Raising Boys and many other books. I spoke to him earlier.